Welcome, fellow Phoenixes, to the Spiritual Phoenix Podcast, where we make a daily offering to the divine by putting our past on the pyre, searching the smoke for spirituality, turning the ashes into art, adapting isolation into connection, and manifesting mental wellness. I'm a spiritual arsonist named Ross Cessna, and I wish to ignite the authentic expression of your soul into any avenue that elevates consciousness. I don't want to tell you what to think, but to get you to think and express yourself in an original way that is uplifting. We are the artists of our lives, and today is a blank canvas. Let's collectively create a better tomorrow. And now I'd like to take a moment and focus on what we're grateful for today. Today, I'm grateful that one of my friends who really kind of helped me integrate back into society, and I attribute a lot of where I'm at to her friendship, has found recovery, and that we can kind of share that together. This topic is unrelated to her, but she's happened to come back into my life recently, and I'm very grateful for that. And today's topic is about real monsters. And I'll get into a couple quotes, then I'll get into the bulk of the episode. Monsters are real, and ghosts are real too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win. And that was said by Stephen King. Vampires pretending to be humans, pretending to be vampires. How avant-garde. That was said by Anne Rice. I think we all have to fight the werewolf within us somehow. That was said by William Kemp. Better a peaceful sleep in the earth than the life of a zombie. Not really dead, but not really alive either. And that was said by Cassandra Clare. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And that was said by Friedrich Nietzsche. So I think everybody can understand that monster myths have some basis in reality. Oftentimes, they're metaphors, in my opinion, for real situations. I found it fitting to use a quote by Stephen King because he was really one of the first authors that I read heavily. Also, he really talks about all these topics in some capacity in his work. Anne Rice is also fitting to me to talk about vampires, as she did many of the vampire books, and I've read some of her work. And Friedrich Nietzsche is just a great philosopher. I'm not familiar with William Kemp or Cassandra Clare, really. But monster myths are as old as humanity, and I am here to say that the monsters they spoke of, in many cases, are real. Maybe not as the myths spoke of them, but they are alive. Monsters are amongst us. And first, I'd like to get into vampires, and I think that many people already understand this concept. But for those that don't, I'll elaborate. No one can actually trace the first origins of the use of vampires. It's believed that it started in Europe by some, but others say that it goes back as far to its ancient Egyptian culture, and likely before that. They were made popular by Bram Stoker with Dracula, but they exist cross-culturally. And Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I think most people would know this now, was based upon Vlad the Impaler, who was a Romanian prince who killed all sorts of people and impaled them and supposedly drank their blood and did all sorts of other disturbing things. The concept of vampires, as many people know, they feed off the life force blood. The reality is that there are psychic vampires or energy vampires. They feed off of others' emotions. They feed off negativity. They create many different situations to get the emotional reactions that they need. And after they drain their victims of this essence, they often leave them. And I've definitely been exposed to people like that are just emotionally draining. being an empathetic person, or I say the term empath, but I don't want it to be attributed with the way most people perceive the term empath. I've definitely encountered that, and I've had people drain me. Uh, I think it's widely accepted in I'm trying to think of the proper term, New Age circles, that energy vampires are real. The next one I'd like to get into is werewolves. This one, again, no one can really trace the origin of this myth, as variations appear cross-culturally, and they go back very, very far. Again, almost as long as people have been on this earth. Often cited to arise during a full moon, which has significance because there's scientific data that suggests that during full moons, crime rates go up and mental health crises occur more frequently. And when people say that astrology or things like that isn't real, they seem to neglect the fact that the moon can impact the ocean and make the ocean move. Obviously, planets in the moon and things like that are going to have effect on consciousness. A, because we're made up of so much water, and B, because we are very small and they are very big, so they influence certain things. One of the old myths of them transforming back to human form is one of the old myths that transform them back to human form is mentioning their name, which I find significant. And the silver bullet concept comes later. That was added in more recent history. Shapeshifters do exist in the sense that decent, otherwise kind people shift into ferocious beasts in actions and words, etc., waking up to have the regret of a werewolf. Did I inflict this suffering? And the name thing, I think, is significant because it kind of speaks to calling someone's name in the heat of argument when they're quote-unquote becoming a werewolf or whatever, and it bringing them back to who they really are. The next one that I'd like to talk about, and the final one for this time, is zombies. Yet again, no one can really trace the origin of this myth, as it appears, again, cross-culturally. The term we understand as zombie today was made popular by African slaves being brought to Haiti and then them practicing voodoo and kind of orally spreading the African tradition. The reality, zombies spun from the belief that certain voodoo practitioners used the quote-unquote dead as slaves. And it is believed that they often, in real life, they were people drugged and made to do someone else's bidding in their stupor. The concept of their thirst for brains became popular in recent history, in part due to movies and things like that. Ironically, I find it fitting our modern zombies are zombified by the same source that has created the modern myths around them. Their thirst to eat brains is, in my mind, important because their brains have been eaten, and the drug that they use would be TV, and TV has the effects of drugs on people if you look into the different ways that it affects people. So they want to eat the brains, and I think it's interesting that they seek out to eat the brains of others. And by that I mean they kind of want to spread their zombification. They're called the living dead. And if you look around, there's so many people that are walking around that aren't really living, and they're certainly not really dead either. And one thing that I'd like to note is when Xbox One came out, there was a commercial around Black Friday when it was released, and it had a bunch of zombies outside of the mall waiting for the release of it or something. And I find that to be frightening in some capacities, and also very telling because so many people were just mindless about it. And I play Xbox One. I'm not going to say that I don't, but I also make sure to feed my brain with the knowledge of other things. I'm not a complete mindless zombie like I was. And I think that the obsession about that and why it sells so much is people can kind of detach from the reality of their own lifelessness. People like to be scared for whatever reason. I don't need horror movies or things like that. I've seen enough horror through my mental health things, and just through reality, and seeing the way that other people treat each other, the real monsters, and how they don't express love, and how they are so fearful and xenophobic and hateful. I mean, that's a reality. One of the things that I'd like to note is all of these beings feed off humans in some direct way. Another thing is all of these beings infected others by the bite in modern culture. That belief of spreading the disease of these of becoming a monster is by the bite, which is fitting, as people who are the real life manifestations of these myths inflict change on others with their quote unquote bites, if their bites are their actions. And I say this from personal experience. I have been a psychic vampire unconsciously. I have been a werewolf unconsciously. I have been a zombie unconsciously. And all of those things in my own personal experience affected other people around me and kind of caused changes to them to make them into similar things. Some people will get this concept, some people won't, and that's totally cool. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I like to express that at the beginning of every show. You don't have to take my opinion. It doesn't matter to me. But I just wanted to address that. I'd like to get into more paranormal or things, and sometimes I'm going to express other opinions on different takes. Sometimes I'm just going to break down the myths. But I've always been fascinated by mythology, by folklore, by quote-unquote paranormal things. I like cryptids as well, so I want to get into those things somewhat. I still want to talk about spirituality, but I want to broaden some certain horizons. And with that, I'm going to put this episode on the pyre. A link below will be the key to all my other links. If you could take the time to listen to the PodTrack, or fill out the PodTrack listener survey, I would appreciate that, as it better helps me understand my audience. If you're watching me, you can listen to me on iTunes, Google Play, Blubrry, Stitcher, TuneIn, if you'd like. Or if you're listening to me on those platforms, you can watch me on YouTube or on my Facebook channel. I love, respect, and appreciate all of you. Make today magical with the attitude of gratitude and a mentality of manifestation. Love and light. Namaste.